Hey, friend, I know how this feels. Waking up exhausted after multiple trips to the bathroom and feeling embarrassed by sudden leaks. I used to be constantly on edge, searching for a restroom whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Woman. I was skeptical at first, but 2 months in, everything changed. I experienced improved bladder control, no more heart-stopping moments when I laugh or sneeze, less urge to go, deeper and more restful sleep. I finally felt like myself again, confident and in control. Better Woman is natural, effective, clinically tested, and trusted by women for over 25 years. Ready to take back your control? Head over to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
Hey, it's time for Terry's Talkin, weekly podcast. David Campbell, your host here, alongside Mr. Terry Pluto. Terry, there are a lot of disappointed Cavs fans today. Maybe we'll start with the Cavs, right?
Yeah, we should. And I want to
Why
start
don't
with
we?
something maybe a little different than you, because I think it's a real positive thing. Because I'm working on a column on this for tomorrow in that Friday's paper. I'm not sure I've ever really heard an athlete after eliminated from the playoffs talk like Donovan Mitchell did. So
How
heartfelt,
so?
about, I couldn't believe we lost. I love playing in that arena, that energy, that crowd. We were 0-3 at home. I'm reading these are exact quotes. We
Yeah.
let the city down. This place is special, really special, and we didn't get it done. I mean, I like that. And he could have played the injury card. And he said, yeah, you'd like to be better, but he said getting beat down like this, and he said you're going to write some stuff. By the way, I cleaned up the language about us. That's going to be fuel for everyone. I've been here. I understand. We understand. Now we got to use it as fuel for next year. Get in the gym. Get a nutritionist. On and on. And he goes,
We'll be back.
we'll be back. And he said, I like this because I'm sure they'll have a discussion with the roster with Kenny and Kobe Altman. But he says, I'd go to bat for every guy in this locker room, willing to die out there for those guys. I believe in everybody in the room. Now, if you didn't watch him taking a beating all 5 games, you think this is like somebody doing a bad patent speech or something. But he went to the foul line 14 times a game. His calf muscle was not good. He couldn't make a jump shot. He still averaged 34 points. And I'll tell you something else. Looking at this, Kenny mentioned this after the game, and I kind of am pounding away. They couldn't get the ball up the court except him.
Yeah. And he
And
shouldn't have to do that.
he shouldn't have to do it is absolutely right. And maybe Kenny could have done some more to help the guards, but Garland was there. But he said, I believe in everybody in here. We believe in each other. It's just that we're a good team, and for 4 or 5 games, 3 games, we didn't show up. We didn't show what we're capable of, and ultimately, that's what we're judged on. Take it to the journalistic bank. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad you're starting with this. So there were a couple of thoughts I had when I saw this. The first one was, and we've talked about this, Terry, all the people nationally, especially, who were like, oh, Donovan Mitchell's just stopping there. He's on his way to New York. He doesn't want to really be there. I mean, Cavs fans have to just be really thrilled with how invested Donovan Mitchell is in Cleveland and in this team. I think people didn't see that coming necessarily in terms of just how committed he is to seeing this thing through and how much he likes it here. And the second thing was, Giannis has given plenty to the city of Milwaukee, and there's a bunch of talk about where he's going to go this summer. It's like, I think it's nice that Cavs fans can look at their superstar, see what he's saying, and kind of sleep good tonight knowing that he's not looking to get out of town. A lot of superstars would have been like, listen, these guys don't have it. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go somewhere where guys know how to win. And this was the opposite of that, I think. Right?
Or they do sort of the passive aggressive thing of like, well, we gave it our all, but we got to make some upgrades, and all that, and actually that would have been true. He could have, but he didn't play that card at all. And I'm really proud of him for that because when I listen to Mitchell, I just I never get the phony antenna up with him. I mean, he just kind of says what he's thinking, and he backs it up on the court. So that's really good, and that's probably actually why I'm hopeful for that. Now, look, 2 more years of this stuff, he may want out, but we'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
And I get it. This is his 8th year. I mean, the man is 7th on the all-time playoff scoring list at like 28 points a game. You know, and you watch these games, it's hard to score 30 points in these games the way they're played and the way they're called. And you know, like yesterday he got 9 rebounds. You know, he went in there and did that. I wanted to start with him because he is really clearly invested. You know, he shows up at a lot of the other sports events around town, and so that's an important thing, and that's why, you know, you go back and why Kobe Altman traded all those draft picks and everything for him, because a guy like this gives you a chance. Now you could argue they wouldn't, you know, or still get stuck in the second round, but you're not sitting there going, we need to get a star. You're going, we need to get the right guys around Donovan Mitchell, and make sure that try to keep him as healthy as possible by the time the playoffs come around. He's always going to be battling, seems like, this calf muscle thing that he had for a couple of years. But man, oh man, you know, what's with this? Like, these other guys are sitting out. I'm not going to, you know, throw stones about their different injuries, but Donovan clearly was hurting, and
Yes,
he
and he
played
was
through it.
playing like 1995 Bulls Knicks basketball,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
just
everybody's like, "Oh, the game's so much more fluid. Everybody's shooting threes," and here's Donovan Mitchell just
because it's like
hurtling his body
because
into
I
the
can't
yeah,
make a jump shot, and you
right,
know
right.
I'm trying to carry them anyway. And I'm sure now here's a big part of this that I think was critical that I haven't heard, because I mean, I've heard people, well, just needed to throw Tristan Thompson in there and knock guys around. Okay, fine. How does that get the ball up the court against Indiana's pressure? Okay, I mean, you know what it does? It makes you feel good. It's a macho thing to say. Yeah, in some of the games it could have been more physical, but when Kenny Atkinson was talking about emotional and physical pressure, he was talking about just that. The guards had trouble getting the ball up the court. Ty Jerome had to back it up, you know, because he was afraid of getting stolen. And Garland was just all over the place. I think that the toe thing was real, but I also think it really impacted his confidence. And David, this is the second playoffs in a row now we've gone through, you know, Garland looking shaky, dealing with injuries, all that stuff. Any thoughts?
All right, so let's do a little bit of a reset here, Terry, because there's a lot to get through. Maybe we can start with this email we got from Bill Maris
Sure.
from Medina, and there's a lot of different topics we can jump on. All right, so the Cavs have been eliminated in 5 games, 114, 105. Here's Bill's email. He says, "Hey guys, after seeing the result of last night's game and the second round exit again for Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs, I'm left with a few questions. Number one, how is this how is this exit with this team different from the other first or second round losses that Donovan Mitchell had in Utah? Is there some sense of rinse and repeat here? Number two, why did Jarrett Allen suddenly disappear as a defensive presence in the last 2 games of the series? It seemed like the lane was wide open at times for the Pacers when you would think it would be walled off with Allen and Mobley as a defensive presence in there. Number three, how does this team lose 3 home games in this
Yeah.
series? Yikes. Were they simply overconfident? Thanks so much for the podcast and the incisive writing. I look forward to it all each week. Go Cavs next year." And again, that's Bill Maris from Medina. All right, so where do you want to start with all that, Terry?
Start with number one, because I forgot what it was. I'm
Okay,
old.
so how is this different than Donovan Mitchell's exits in Utah?
I don't know enough about the Utah situation, but the word in Utah was always they were a very similar, good regular season team. But when you look at those rosters in Utah, who was the other star there? You know, they went through kind of different point guards, but they really didn't have. In fact, that's why they decided to break up Rudy Gobert and Mitchell from the rest of the roster to reset, try to get draft picks, and build again, because they felt they were just walled off in the second round. And By the way, I'm going to look at that for a column going on. The Utah rebuild. Roberta was asking me about that, and it's like that has not gone well at all for them.
No.
Not at all. And so that's a thing there. But the problem certainly is not Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, who's I believe he's with
Minnesota.
Minnesota. He'll
Mhm.
tell you the problem ain't him either. So that's not the problem. Now, it was possible the combination of Gobert and Mitchell, because Gobert really he's a good defensive player, but he's not tremendously mobile, that kind of thing. And that could have been a problem. But it just feels like rinse and repeat to Mitchell. I know that. And what I liked about him is just doubling down on we got to get it done in Cleveland, because the frustration, um, would different for Cavs fans. This would feel like um, this is like the first round with him, then 2 years of the second round here. I mean, but for him, this is eight of these things. 8 of these things after you're averaging 28 points a game or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I remember he'd have a bad game here or there, but man, this guy, this if you're going to get to the finals or whatever, this is the kind of guy you want. I mean, he's not LeBron, because LeBron was, playoff LeBron was similar to Mitchell. Only he's like 7 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, and this is not to knock LeBron. I mean, he is a unique physical specimen, but he also has the drive of an overachiever. Mitchell is a star as a driver overachiever, but he's listed as 6'3". Okay, fine. I used to say I was 6 foot. I'm 5'10". Whatever. But he's not that kind of guy that can go get, like LeBron would go get 15 rebounds in a game. And so they have to just look at this. And I think they really got to look at the backcourt. I know Jarrett didn't have a good game 4.
Did you want to talk about Jared Allen real quick, since he was
Yeah.
number 2 on Bill's
Yeah,
list
go
here, and then
ahead.
we'll move on. So go ahead.
Why don't you? I want to look up something. Why don't you say your thoughts on Jared Allen, then we'll try to take a look and see.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the playoffs is, and the Cavs talked about this, is like every possession matters. And Jared Allen, today they had their kind of clean out your locker interview day, and I think he admitted pretty much that he wasn't consistent enough.
Yeah.
And like, you got to bring it every game and every possession.
Yeah.
And there were games when he was a dominant force, and there were games when you were looking to see if he was on the court. And you can't have that and win in the playoffs. And I think he knows that. And listen, these reputations are starting to follow these guys now. And I was interested in Max Strus like today at his interview.
Yeah, where was he other than being in foul trouble? 0 for 7.
Well,
I
again,
think he was
another
in that
guy
game.
who was very up and down. But he said we weren't ready for game 1. The Miami series didn't prepare us for it. Game 2, you
I'm glad
can't
he
lose
brought that up.
one. You got to close those games out. To me, we have to get tougher mentally and physically. You can talk about it all you want, but until you actually do it, it doesn't matter. So that's where Max Strus stands with everything.
And Max was a real disappointment. He got a couple quick fouls. He couldn't make a shot. Now, I was looking at Jarrett's stats going into game for the Miami series, plus going into the dreadful game 4 in Indiana. At that point, he was averaging nearly 11 rebounds a game. And then the last 2, I mean, I don't know what anybody was doing in game 4. I mean, they all should have been, I call it just the worst playoff game in Cavs history in that. But in game 5, I thought, Jarrett didn't really give it that much. One of the things that, because I kind of was there at the game for a while, then I also spent some time listening to the national broadcast on TV with, I think it was Greg Anthony, the former UNLV guard, NBA guard. And he was talking about how, like, in the second quarter, the Cavs were punishing them inside with Allen and with Mobley, and they got away from it. And like when they got up to that 19-point lead, at one point they had a lineup that I really liked out there. It was across the front. You had Allen, you had Mobley, you had Wade, you had Hunter, and Mitchell. And all of a sudden, the pace slowed down. They had the length bothering the Pacers, and the Cavs kept getting out in front that way. And that was an interesting lineup and a good thing. And I just think when you play the Pacers, it's a battle of their nickname, the Pacers pace. Nobody brings the ball up the court past the half court line faster than the Pacers. Mike Fratello gave me that stat, something like 4.8 seconds. Nobody throws more passes per possession than the Pacers, which is remarkable when they're playing that fast. But the ball just zips all over the court. And so if you could put the ball through the rim now and then on offense, and especially stop them and get the rebounds, you could really then dictate the pace, which they did for a while. And I just felt like when Garland was in there, and that they just lost the big guys out there. And I'm not excusing everything, but you have to give them the ball. You could just look at it; the middle was open.
Yeah, and Jared Allen needs that. Like, he can't create his own offense most of the
Right, and they
time.
got to
That's
get
where
on
it has to
Jared's
happen.
butt when he's 5 feet from the basket. Don't throw it to the corner. Score.
Yep.
That was one
Okay.
thing, and maybe somebody really does, during games, whether Tristan or somebody, needs to just light a fire on him and let him know. Because I think down deep behind the smiling, joking Jarrett, is a young man who still doesn't know how good he can be, and I think lacks confidence sometimes in himself. Now, big men, they live I learned this from Wayne Embry and a couple other people. They live in such a different world than we do. I mean, everywhere they walk into a place, people look at them. A lot of times they feel very self-conscious. None of us, I doubt there's anybody here that people are going to go up to them and say, "Hey, is it raining up there?"
Yeah.
That
Or
was,
are you a basketball player?
yeah, Will Chamberlain told me that was the thing that used to really bother him the most. He said they come up to him and they say, "Is it raining up there?" He goes, I interviewed Will a couple times over the years, and once it's for my book, Tall Tales. Will said, "You know what you want to do when a guy says that? You want to spit on the top of his head. How's that, buddy?" Yeah,
It
it's
is
raining
raining.
up here,
Yes.
and there you are. He goes, "I never did it," but it's a different thing. And or people say, "Man, if I was as big as Jared Allen, I'd average 30 points a game." No, you wouldn't.
All right. So there's kind
Yes.
of a big question that I want to ask you, Terry, that I think you answered in your column today, but we can address it here too. And then I want to kind of do a little segment called "If I Was a Cavs Fan,"
Okay.
and get your thoughts on some things. But the injuries, I don't think the Cavs blame them. I think Rick Carlisle, the Pacers coach, kind of said like we were at our best and the Cavs weren't, so he kind of
Mm-hmm.
gave a little bit of credence. Did the injuries matter? Would the Cavs have won this series without the injuries in your mind?
Won the series? No. Will they won maybe another game or two? Yes. Because I think Garland would have been moving better, at least get the ball up the court. That would have helped. I I don't know what to make of Mobley because he missed the ankle, but then when he came back, he played pretty well. I mean, pretty well. And
Yeah, he did.
other than they would forget about him now and then, but he did. Um, and I get it, Hunter dislocated right thumb. That's hard. It mattered, but the fact is, and I will give. Um, I always respected Carlisle, but I even came away, with more respect for him because right now I'm looking up the. Here we go. Since January 1st, Indiana is 42-16. They were 34 and they were 34 and 14 heading into the playoffs, and they won both of their series in 5 games. They were playing as well as anybody in the NBA as the season came to a close. Now, to Strus's point, and I think is valid, Miami didn't prepare them at all. And I remember I was talking to Mike Fratello in the middle of the playoffs, the first round, and Mike was saying, that's the danger sometimes. You kind of blow through the regular season, then you get a weak opponent in the first round because Miami had went through all that stuff with Jimmy Butler and everything else, and you just think, okay, here we are. Where while it took 5 games for Indiana to get rid of Milwaukee, they had some real battles in there. And I think they also just battled to win their 52 games, and it was more of a struggle for them.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the Cavs went through this last year,
Yeah,
right? Like they played Orlando last year. They played Boston. They
yeah.
know what's involved. So I get what they're saying. Maybe in terms of the speed of the game and everything, like there was a huge leap from Miami to the Pacers. But like, all right, so you take one game to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But like then it's like let's go. Like what do you
Yeah,
you know what this is from last year? So I don't really buy that.
yeah. I
I
mean,
don't know.
I do think they were very they were overconfident.
Going
That's
back
all.
to our going back to the question from Bill's letter email
Yeah,
earlier. So,
yeah. They
all
were
right,
overconfident. Yeah.
I want to let's try this. If I was a Cavs fan, I got a few statements here, Terry, that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So, if I was a Cavs fan, I would be wondering what was going on with Darius Garland this series, and if I
Mm-hmm.
was a Cavs fan, I'd be wondering if he's ever going to be a clutch playoff player. And the reason I say that is because if you watched him early in this series, he's on the bench laughing it up with Evan Mobley. When the Cavs are losing, he comes back and he committed an offensive foul on one play, and he's laughing about that. I haven't seen Donovan Mitchell laugh in a month or smile.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and here's Darius Garland acting like it's a January game against the Pelicans down in New Orleans, and I just thought he was. I didn't like what I saw from his um, body language, and I think fans might have been rubbed the wrong way by that. And you can't equate a guy smiling on the court with why he didn't play well. But I just you talk about the mentality, and I did not see a
Mm-hmm.
playoff meanness from him in this series in terms of the body language. And I wonder if he's ever going to be
Well,
because, I don't know. What do you
yeah.
think?
Well, will he even be healthy? I mean, that's another thing. Seems like by the end of the year, he's always worn down with something or other. Oh, I mean, Garland's stats. He shot 34% from the field. He shot 17% on threes. It was bad, and he just it seemed like too when he got up past half court. Now all of a sudden he wanted to like get some kind of isolation thing and go 1-on-1. And since he wasn't making a jumper when he went in there, I don't know. He looked overwhelmed, and he's looked overwhelmed, a fair amount of time in his career in the playoffs. And also just in terms of your fit, does he fit with Donovan? Donovan so many times over the last few years has been Darius's cheerleader and sports psychologist. You can see it on the floor. But I did notice this time Donovan, well, maybe he was just so busy trying to kind of keep himself together physically, but that was a problem. And
It was a
a
striking
year,
comparison, though. Yeah, like
yeah,
Darius Garland is like in hockey. There's a thing where in the playoffs you never talk about your injury until you're
yeah,
done. And in the middle of this series, Darius Garland was telling
yeah,
reporters about people don't know what I'm going through and how
that's right,
painful
yeah.
it is. And when I saw that, I'm like, this could be some trouble for the Cavs if
Mm-hmm.
he's already making kind of excuses for why he's not playing
Yeah,
well, and the series isn't even over.
Mitchell refused to get into his injuries.
Yes, I'm going to
I
be there
think he said,
Tuesday.
"Oh yeah, I'm
Was what
bothered
he
by
told Chris
something, but I'm
Fedor the other night.
playing." Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what he told Chris, and that's and also I will say this: we heard very little from Mobley,
true.
about his injury.
Yeah,
He just played.
yep. He just
I
showed
mean,
up.
you look at Mobley. I'm looking. He really had a good playoff against Indiana. He averaged 18 points, 9.8 rebounds, and he shot 58% from the field. By the way, your leading 3-point shooter in the playoffs among guys that started was Evan Mobley at 43%. Now, what happened here too is the Cavs were retooling how they play. They were going more in the Celtic mode of spread them out, fire the threes, and they just the avalanche thing. They just buried teams in the regular season and against Milwaukee. I do, excuse me, against Miami, and where I do think Indiana with the speed or whatever now really kind of took some of that stuff away, and they were willing to let that middle be open if the Cavs would exploit. That's why he just kept going in there. He realized, okay, my jumper's not working. I'm going to just keep going in there and going in there. But I don't know what Kenny was doing in terms of trying to get the big men the ball more or what, but Mobley, I heard some people criticizing him. I don't have a problem with how he played. 34 minutes, 18 points, 10 rebounds, shooting 58%. That's a winning performance in the playoffs.
Yeah. Do you think so, Terry? A year ago, and you've written about this, that you didn't think the Mitchell Garland backcourt was something that was tenable in the future in terms of playoff success, and I think you're back on that. You
Sure.
think they need to make a move here, right? And we'll have a lot
Yeah,
of
I
time
would
to
like to
talk about
see.
that this
Right,
summer.
would they have to do that? I mean, you probably wouldn't do it because he's a max player, or you bring Garland off the bench. You
And
start
put
with,
in
well, right now it
Strus.
would be somebody like Strus, but there
Mm-hmm.
may be some other bigger guard that you could pick up or something, and you try to work it that way. But I have not seen Garland rise to the occasion, in the various playoffs. I just haven't. And it's it's a discouraging thing if you're a Cavs fan, because he's a two-time All-Star, and he is supposed to be able to to do these things. And I was just looking, actually Garland's numbers against the Celtics were better than I thought on one regard. He averaged 17 points, but he only shot 40% from the field and 30% on three. See, that's the thing. He's supposed to be a really good shooter, and you look at what he shot, in those things. Now I'm taking a look at uh, the one difference. This was the against the Knicks. Against the Knicks, he was better than I thought. This was a couple years ago. Garland averaged 21 points, shot 44 from the field, 39 on threes. So that was better. I seem to just remember Jalen Brunson tearing him up, but at least he's now had. By the way, had Garland put those numbers together against the Pacers that I just read,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
if he had averaged 21 and shot, you know, 44 from the field and 39 on threes, this series is still going.
Yeah.
They may
And the
lose,
other
but
thing,
this series is still going.
yeah, this was not a great matchup for the Cavs either. I think in
No.
terms of roster construction, like the Pacers are a very switchable team, right? Like there's not many guys on that team that you're like, oh, we're going to try and isolate him and pick on him. Garland is
Mm-hmm.
always going to be that, and I think the
Mm-hmm.
idea of maybe coming off the bench with him might hold some merit, Terry.
Yeah,
I
because
don't
I
know.
think but you're gonna have to sell it to him, and but because remember a year ago there was that report that if Mitchell re-signed, that Garland wanted to be traded. I don't know how true it was, but my guess is it was probably something at least his agent was thinking about. And well, Mitchell's the franchise, and I still like the ball in Mitchell's hands quite a bit if he's got the right people there, because he's an elite passer. He really is. When he doesn't feel he has to do everything.
Yeah.
So this will be fun to talk about. I'm far more concerned about the backcourt than the front court. Now they want to bring in another big guy, to another backup center or something like that. That's fine. But the backcourt, I think, was exposed by Indiana because they had trouble getting the ball up the court.
All right, I got two more of these. If I was a Cavs fan, Terry, we can go through them real
Okay.
quick. If I was a Cavs fan, I would be wondering what this series means for Ty Jerome's contract this offseason. I think he
Ah.
made himself a lot of money during the regular season, and I'm wondering if he maybe cost himself a little bit by just the Cavs couldn't go to him because he wasn't playing well. What do you think of that? Any
Sure.
logic to that he might have cost himself a little bit of money in the playoffs by not
Well,
being
now
able to
you're
contribute
back
as much
to,
as
if
he
you're
wants?
looking at him, that this is a really good guy to come off the bench. You're not thinking this is a guy that, boy, if we start him, he could average 18 or 20 a game like he did at different times during the regular season. So then you saw that it was funny, the kind of plotting moves that he had that worked so well against just about most of the teams, and certainly Miami. See, Miami is an older or a slower team in that. Indiana just took him right out of the game. McConnell and those guys just went right at him. He had trouble getting the ball. Then he went, I got to do something. I got to do. So he's forcing long threes. He's dribbling into traffic, getting shots blocked.
Did
Yeah,
not
I
have a lot
think
of space to operate. You're right.
right. It might help the Cavs re-sign the guy because he's in a good spot here. That's the old thing of when you go to take a guy who's a pretty effective bench player off a really good team, and your team's not that good, he can really get exposed. And so don't overpay for that guy. That's one of those NBA things. And if the player's smart, he makes a good deal to stay where he is with that team, where he is really, his skills are underlined and some of his deficiencies are hidden.
Yeah. That'll be one of the interesting storylines that we'll have to be watching here
Mm-hmm.
this summer. We'll see. All right, so I got one more. If I was a Cavs fan, I would be glad. Like Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter have been through this. I know it's a rough day for Cavs fans,
Yeah.
but like Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter, when they were at Virginia, right? It was the 2017-2018 season. They went into the NCAA tournament 31-2, and then Virginia became the first number 1 seed to ever lose to a number 16 seed in the NCAA tournament in the history of the tournament.
Was
Ty
that
Jerome and
Mercer though?
DeAndre
They got
Hunter.
beat. I
It was
forgot who it was.
Maryland, Baltimore County,
Oh, Maryland, Baltimore County. Yeah, I knew it was somebody of
UMBC.
those. I think it was
Yeah.
Mercer knocked off Duke one year. That's
Yes. Yeah. Was that a 15-2? I'm trying to remember. But
yeah, it could have
yeah. But
been.
then
Yeah,
what did Virginia do the
yeah,
next season? They came back with Ty
right.
Jerome and DeAndre Hunter, and they won the whole thing. So these guys know what it's like to be at the lowest of lows and to come back from that. So I
And
think if
also
you're a Cavs fan, you have
right,
to
they
feel
do
good about
that,
that.
and they're good guys. They play well together. The nice thing we're talking about with the Cavs is, other than Ty Jerome, you don't have anybody significant who's a free agent. So therefore, you have guys actually who have trade value. If you want to trade Jared Allen, you can get quite a bit for him, I think, because he's not a max player. You want to trade DeAndre Hunter, you can get quite a bit for him. I don't know what you would get for Garland because he is a max player, and
Yeah, he does he
they'd be
does have
looking
3
same.
seasons left, I think, right after this one.
Yeah,
So
right. So
that's one positive.
that's there you go. So it's interesting to see what they will do. But I mean, the night is frustrating. This is. I mean, we're talking real NBA basketball here. We're talking about playoffs, and we're talking about having a superstar that re-signed here and likes to be here. I think Kenny is an excellent coach. I wish he had not dwelled on the physical part of the being fouled early in the game. He should have done it once and dropped it. I think he went like twice over 3 days. Stop it, Kenny. That gets in your guys' heads. And also, I will say this about Kenny, and I have a relationship with Kenny, that this is the first time in his career he was a head coach of a team with great expectations. Because when he was at Brooklyn, yeah, the last year they brought in Kyrie and Durant. Durant blew his Achilles, or whatever it was, but that was just a mess. But there he was just in the building situation. Here it's like, we're giving you a fast race car. You better put this thing to the floor and get out to the front of the field. And he actually did all the stuff that he said he would do and they wanted done. They kept the minutes down with all the starters. They played the bench more than ever. They won a ton of games without really gunning the team to win 64 games. And they still fell in the second round. That, I'm sure, is one of those things internally that's frustrating for them.
All right. That was a lot to go through, Terry. Anything else you want to mention real quick about the Cavs before we take a break
No,
here?
other than, I'll be curious to see what they're going to do. I mean, but this is not, blow up the team, eat dirt and die, none of that stuff. It's still a team with guys in their middle to late 20s under contract. You drop this team into about 22 or 24 other NBA cities, they would be glad to trade you their roster for this roster.
Yes. And the runway is long, as we've talked about, and as Kobe Altman has talked about.
Kobe Altman is he should be an air traffic controller. He's always talking about runways.
That's right. Hey, there's a lot of topics here with the Cavs. If you have questions, things you'd like to see the Cavs do this offseason, we have a lot of time this summer to talk about all that. Send us an email at sports@cleveland.com if you want to throw out some Cavs ideas or anything else that we talk about here, or something, story or anything else you want to share. Again, sports@cleveland.com. Put Terry's Talkin in the subject line, and we'll try and get it on the next podcast. So, all right, we'll take a quick break here, Terry.
Yes.
And when we come back, we are going to talk about the Browns. And I want you to get into, you have some inside scoop on the Browns draft approach. So we'll get into that, talk some Guardians as well, and some more of your emails when we return on Terry's Talkin.
You know that feeling when you're about to score 30% off, but they want your number? Ugh. Give them your Line 2 number instead. It's a second line on your phone, perfect for nabbing promo codes without inviting spam to your party. Sign up for every discount under the sun, then block the junk texts that follow. You get all the perks, but none of the spammy baggage. More codes, less chaos. Visit line2.com/audio or download Line 2 in the App Store and get your shopping sidekick today. Because the only thing blowing up your phone should be good deals.
Hey, we're back on Terry's Talkin'. Quick reminder about Terry's newsletter. Comes out every Wednesday, although there won't be one next week. Terry's going to be taking a couple of days off, but it will be back in 2 weeks on the 28th. All kinds of behind-the-scenes insight. You'll get stuff first before anywhere else, even on our podcast here, and lots of great contract info and behind-the-scenes things that Terry is thinking about. So check that out. You can go to cleveland.com/Pluto. There's a blue bar at the top. Click on that, and you can sign up and subscribe. So, all right, let's get into the Browns, Terry. I guess we got to start with this email because I know you have some things you want to talk about the Browns draft approach. Here's an email. It says, Haslam needs Dion for the same reason he needed Manziel. Distraction. Shiny thing. The creation of drama to take the focus off the fact that the franchise is a dumpster fire. OBJ's daddy and Manziel will pale in comparison to the off-field drama that Dion will bring for Haslam, and that comes to us from Jackson. I assume it's not Hugh Jackson. Jackson sent that in. But Terry, you got a lot of... It could be. You never know. You got some kind of behind-the-scenes stuff about how the Browns approached the draft, why they did what they did. You want to get into that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, that part, that's kind of an easy narrative, but Jimmy's trying to get a stadium built, and he knows shiny objects doesn't get it done. You know, he's got to have a team that is willing, and I really believe that partly fueled that the quote big swing they took for Deshaun Watson. Start winning, and then kind of like it all comes together. Watson's got us playing for the Super Bowl. I want the Dome Stadium. All this right, a conduit, the perfect storm to create exactly this football empire in Cleveland. And of course, Watson got hurt. It was a bust out. So I don't think Shedeur Sanders had anything to do with that. Not a fifth-round pick. So we'll talk about the draft, but I just wanted to kind of put that away.
Sure.
You can argue very well that maybe Jimmy Haslam doesn't know how to win, but I would disagree with anybody saying he doesn't want to win. Wanting and knowing how are two different things, but he definitely wants to win. He wouldn't be redoing these contracts and upfronting all this money and everything else unless he wanted to win. Knowing how to get it done is the harder part. Just like in the draft, I always say, it's much easier to collect draft picks than make draft picks.
All right. So what did you hear about the way the Browns were rating Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, why they ended up with two quarterbacks? A lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff that I think fans might want to hear about here.
Well, let's start with the Hunter thing. They were committed to taking Hunter until they were able to really make sure they were able to get the first round pick in 2016 from Jacksonville.
26.
And I think, 26, excuse me. And then also I think they were arguing about like a second or third round pick in this year. Ended up being a second round pick. Basically, the Browns got what they wanted. And so if you look at that, what they did, the trade right now is Mason Graham. It's Junkins from Ohio State, and it's Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. So that's what they've got, and they still have the 26th draft pick hanging out there. They had Graham rated among the top 5 players. And so they were very content to take him. They had Junkins rated over Hendrickson and just about everybody else. With
Travion Henderson from Ohio State.
Yeah, Trevion Henderson from Ohio State. Fans want to know why that was. They just think that not that he could be another Nick Chubb, but sort of he has Chubb-like characteristics. Big tough running back. Succeeded in the SEC, succeeded in the Big Ten. Very good in some big games. Kind of keeps his mouth shut, plays ball, does the right stuff. And they wanted to redo the running back room, and they were not planning on taking Samson from Tennessee, but they had him. These guys, they kind of developed their draft board, and they put values on them, now good or bad. As I said, and that's the other thing. It's a lot easier to develop a good draft board than have that draft board be correct. But they just thought Samson, I heard a third round grade on him. He was available in the fourth round. And they said, we got to take this guy. We'll have two guys, that can help on special teams, or just this way you got some depth there, because they want to run the ball. I mean, fans should like this. And I was telling one of the top people from the Browns, I said, I like this. You're getting back they're really working on the zone blocking with the Bloomgren, the new offensive line coach. So they were content to do that. Then of course comes the quarterbacks. And were you shocked about Dylan Gabriel?
A little bit, yeah, because there hadn't been much pre-draft connection between them, but obviously he liked them and they liked him, and they might have gone a little higher than maybe other people had him rated. But hey, what do they say about a quarterback? When you find a guy you really like, you got to take him, right?
So and you're in the third round. I mean, fine. Something like Joe Banner told me these stats. It's like 28% of third rounders end up like starting for 3 years. That's about it. Most of you are getting role players, special teams guys, part-time scouters. He also told me that from the fourth round down, you often will find in many drafts guys who were picked up as undrafted free agents, starting more games over a 3-year period than guys in those rounds. So it's kind of like, and that's why even the payroll that the NFL has reflects that. Because you always hear like, well, I think Shedeur, he got 4 years, $4.2 million. I think it's like $300,000 is guaranteed. That's it. Something like that.
He was making jokes about how small his signing bonus was too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, compared to he probably bought a car worth more money than that from his $6 million at Colorado. So they had Dylan Gabriel rated as a third-round pick. He was there. They took him. Now, my source told me there was one other team he knows that had them rated as a late third round, and another team fourth. He's not saying everybody had them that high, but he said there were a couple other teams that were interested. And the Browns, he's close to the Browns, and he said that the Browns were concerned that they might not get Gabriel. So they didn't want to wait till the fourth. They had him as a third-round pick, so they took him. And clearly they didn't have Shedeur rated that high because they took a second running back in the fourth round, even though they already took one, because they just felt that this guy, they really believe between his two running backs, at least one of them is going to be a big-time impact player. That's their feeling. And bring them both in here, and why not? We're going to run the ball, and suddenly you're not looking at, Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford or whatever. You're looking at two guys who were decorated college players at the hardest. They both played in the SEC because Junkins was at Ole Miss, and then Junkins also thrived in the Big Ten. So that was all that. But then came Shedeur, and I think they had a fourth-round grade on him. I'm not positive, but I think that's what they had. Clearly, they didn't have a third, and they didn't have a high fourth, or they would have taken him. But he's still sitting there, so that ended up in the fifth round. They put together, I forgot what a sixth and a seventh or whatever it was, and they got him. And their feeling was, remember what I said before about what percentage of these guys in the fourth and fifth rounds, it's less than, you start getting fifth, sixth rounds, seventh rounds, you're talking about 15% of those guys ever end up starting for like 3 years. So they're thinking the average fifth-round guy is a special teams guy. Maybe he's a nickel defensive back if we're lucky. Maybe he's one of those tight end H-backs that comes in a special situation on offense. Or we always say, this is what I was told the Browns are saying internally, they always say, well, the most important position on the field, David Campbell, is
quarterback.
Why can't we have two? Why not two?
Right.
Almost like the two running back. Well, maybe one of these guys will come out. And they
Especially
figured,
when one of the guys in your quarterback room is 40 years old. Why not take two, right?
And the other one is trying to rebuild his career, and you have no quarterback. Now, you could say this creates maybe an awkward situation for Stefanski. First of all, Stefanski by now should be majored in awkward situations after having dealt with Deshaun Watson. The difference is he's going to get to pick his quarterback. The front office is not going to be saying, we got to make that Watson thing work. I mean, we put all this money in draft. I mean, what's the investment in any of these guys? Flacco's a one-year contract. Pickett's a one-year contract, a third-round contract, and a fifth-round. Basically, this is almost like a rummage sale put together, hoping to find a jewel or a great antique. That'd be the older guy, younger guy, whatever, in the room. And
we won't tell Flacco you called him an antique.
No, well, the antique could be worth a lot of money. It depends. So at that point, Sanders really didn't get into their plans until they already had Gabriel taken, and then he started thinking about it. And they also think, sometimes you could trade one of these guys within a year and at least get a fifth or sixth. I mean, then they get a fifth-round pick back for Josh Dobbs. I mean, they've gotten value out of these guys who are just so. So they just thought there's no downside. They believe that, they're going to stick with this. You've got to earn everything, Shedeur, and we don't have to keep you. And so and they did spend a lot of time with Shedeur and also Hunter because they were doing a lot of work on Hunter, when they were out of Colorado. So they feel that they're the right place for him. We'll see.
Well, and as you say, Terry, they've gone from basically having no options, which is play Deshaun and make it work, to having these four options this year. And then if none of these are where they want to be next year, they package their 2 first-rounders and try to move up and take somebody next year. So
exactly, and they could even throw in one of these guys in one of those trades too. So that's how they feel about it. And look, I'm quarterback dramaed out, Dave. I'll tell you right now. I mean, that's my only objection to Sanders is just all the, just the hype about him. But
yeah, I wish everybody would just kind of chill out a little bit. Like there were people like, who won the day last week? Was it Dylan Gabriel or? They're throwing against no defense and rudimentary routes, and we don't know what the coaches are telling them to do. Like it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Yeah. I mean, you want to interview them after to hear what they're feeling about how things are going, but like, let's not do a daily quarterback derby on day one of rookie minicamp.
No,
it's
now
just
the
crazy.
Nice thing that now I was told about Sanders. Now Dylan Gabriel's been to 3 schools with I don't know, like 3 or 4 different offensive coordinators. He could play under center. He could play in the shotgun. Just about every offense out there he's had. Shedeur's always been in the shotgun. So, I mean, just getting used to taking a snap under center, bring the guys out of the huddle, all that kind of stuff. That is new for him. Play action. And that they think is going to take some work. And these people think he's just going to step in and start. Because they're not going to run that offense. Heck, they tried to run it last year with Deshaun. You saw how good that looked. They're not going to run that. And so he's going to have to learn these other
all
things.
New footwork and mechanics and the whole bit.
Right. Now, the good thing is if he wants to, they think he's as I kept saying, about 3 times, as my source told me, he's really a good kid. And he says, we're convinced to put the work in. But he's got a lot of work to do. And now he's going to be in that room where there's going to be a lot of pressure to do the work with Flacco and with Pickett and with Dylan. So they're going to be on him, and I think he'll have to respond. But he's got a lot of making up to do. The Colorado situation and where did he play? Jackson State before that?
Yep, Jackson State.
And even going back to high school, where he always was under his father's tutelage, that was not the best preparation. Meantime, what I had written a couple of weeks ago, and my source told me again, that not having an agent, having dad do it, that just took a situation that was tenuous and made it worse. And we're not going to talk to this team because we think we're going to the top 5 or 10, and they just misjudged a lot of stuff. So, but if you notice, like at the press conference, I'm going to try to get the exact quote from Barry, but I believe he says something like, "We don't hold family members against players we draft." In other words, he says something really close to that.
That was pretty much it.
And I think that's fair.
Yeah. All right, Terry. Anything else on the Browns we want to get into here?
No, I think that was enough for that.
Yeah, they're going to be heading into OTAs here, and then June mini camp, so we'll be getting to see some football with full rosters and see how things go out in Berea.
Oh, they're very, very, very excited about Fannin, the kid from
tight end.
The tight end from Bowling Green. Yeah.
All right.
And Canton McKinley, former safety from Canton McKinley. I think he's like a 1-star recruit or something like that. It's just incredible. They just think that this is going to be Kevin Stefanski's new favorite toy. Be able to move him around.
You watch him; he's hurdling guys and putting out, doing spin moves. It's things you don't see from most NFL tight ends. So I think
they are more interested in kind of bracketing with Njoku and a really impact pass catching tight end than they were taking what they would consider a so-so receiver in the draft. Now you could see how that goes. But they just think, remember when Flacco was playing, tight ends got the ball a lot. It was Amari Cooper in the tight end show. And I think that so there's your Jerry Jeudy in the tight end show. I don't know enough about Pickett to say that. My guess is Gabriel will probably throw it wherever you tell him to throw it. And so that's, he's had everybody telling him for all kinds of different ways to throw it. You don't survive all that. What are you playing, like 64 college games or something?
Yeah.
He's like a 5-year NFL, veteran when you look at all the experience.
All right. Let's move into the Guardians, Terry. They are 25-17. They're 2.5 games behind the Tigers in the American League Central. There's been a lot going on with the Guardians, and I know you keep a good eye on the minor leaguers, and we were talking about Kefus last week. So I'm going to just throw it to you here. Gabriel Arias has been moved over to shortstop. Rocchio got sent down last night. Ben Lively got put on the injured list.
Well,
there's a lot going on here. How do you see things shaking out? And just give us kind of like, how will the next maybe month look here? How do you see things going down?
Well, they're going to be looking for more starting pitchers. You always are anyway. Doug Nikhazy, he came up, he had one bad outing. I wouldn't hold that against him at all. But Parker Messick is a guy that I liked from that. Was it like the prospects game, or whatever they called in spring training that they had? I had heard about him, but I could probably get to see him pitch. Yeah. That guy looked, and he looking good down there. I think he might get the next call to come up, especially if it's going to be for like more than one start. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Nikhazy, or that's 2 of them there. The bullpen, they're finally they have this guy Nick Enright that they love, and he's a cancer survivor, and he was pitching very well last year and hurt his shoulder. Now he's back, so we'll see. Of course, you've got Bieber and Means waiting to come off of this, hopefully by the middle of the summer. And you hope at least one of them could pitch like Matthew Boyd did last year. And maybe that's what almost we were talking about the 2 running backs or 2 quarterbacks. Well, 2 Tommy Johns, you hope you get one that'll help you. So that's when you look at the situation there. Second base, they were pretty much all set to bring up Brito and send down Rocchio when Brito broke his thumb. So that took care of that, and he was going to play second. Arias was going over to short. So now, fortunately for them, Daniel Schneeman's having a heck of a year. I don't know how long it's going to last, but he could hold the fort till Brito gets back. Bazana is hitting over 300 this month in Double-A, but they're not going to rush him to the majors at all. They want to make sure he just needs to get more at bats, And I
And still
also think a little bit of it
struggling a
on.
little bit against lefties, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And I just think this guy is so driven. All the stuff that's attracted to him, to the Guardians, so into the everything, video and analytics or whatever. He could be like making, looking at six sides of a square. In other words, really overthinking some things at times. Um, and so that's kind of it. But Messick is a guy to look at. We got Wilson up here there. I mean, Jonathan Rodriguez is hitting. I don't know what to make of it. They should send. I would send Big Christmas down if he's not going to play. What's the point? Right now, I mean, you could flop Big Christmas with Jonathan Rodriguez. They're both right-handed hitters, and then you do your platoon with Brennan there in the outfield. I don't know. They are committed to seeing if they could get some more out of Nolan Jones. Now, maybe a week from now that changes, but I was told that the other day that they're not in any hurry to get rid of Nolan Jones. I was not told that about Big Christmas, nor was I told that about Rocchio, and the next day they sent him out. But that's when
And
I
they can't
found out
send
that
Jones down, right? They can't send Jones down. So
yeah, although somebody going to claim a guy hitting 163. I mean, I don't know.
no, true.
I mean, that's. I mean, really. I mean, he was available in spring training, and the best they got from him was Tyler Freeman. I mean, it's just that was, and I don't think any other teams, probably than the Guardians, were even bidding on the guy. So that's a quick look for them. Meanwhile, how many bases did Jose steal the other day?
Oh my gosh, well,
3 or
3 in one
4.
night, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes on with him. It's just one of the most remarkable things to watch. And then also, this is what can drive you nuts about baseball. I had written off Arias. He had over 580 major league at bats over a couple of years, hitting about 220. Seemed to have like a lot of brain farts in the field. Once in a while he has them, but he's a different player. It kicked in for him, and I think some of it sometimes is just maturity. And maybe he knew that he was out of options, and that he had to play, and maybe that's what he needed to hear. You're going to play, so don't screw it up, but you're going to play, and maybe that's what worked for him. And meanwhile, Manzardo's hitting for power. Santana will probably continue to play better as the temperature rises. And so there they. I mean, I don't know how they're 25 and 17. Of course, I didn't know how they won 92 games or whatever it was last year.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of guys in the next month or two that could be coming back from stuff. So they might get some reinforcements here pretty soon, and we'll see how that all shakes out. So.
Right, and I mean, a month from now, Brito could be back. A month from now, Bazana could be on a tear. I mean, there could be a lot of things like that. Maybe a month from now, Big Christmas puts his act together down there, and they bring him back. But the nice thing is, the way they do business with, they're creating opportunities for their players, and that continues to pay off for them. It bothers me about Lively, though, because it was kind of like you always could count on him for 5 or 6 innings, and
yeah, now they don't have
that's a tough
that.
one.
So.
Yeah.
Well, at least Ortiz is starting to put some starts together, and they've got some other. Not everybody's not down at the same time as we've seen in the past.
Right,
so.
and they liked Ortiz, they targeted Ortiz, and that's why they traded Jimenez for him. As a convoluted deal through 3 teams, but this is a guy they targeted. I always kind of watch the guys they target and see if the judgment is right or not. And I think they're going to be right with Ortiz. He's got enough, good stuff, and it's hard to find guys that you look at and say he could pitch 5 or 6 innings in modern baseball. Don't ask me how we've ever got to that point. If a guy goes 7, you want to build a statue to him. I don't know how where you get that, but that's how it is today.
All right, I want to ask you about the reinstatements that came up, but we got a quick email here from Joe Curry in Youngstown, and Joe wants to ask about the rule changes. He says, hey, Terry and Dave, now that MLB is a couple of years into the rules changes, how do the players and umpires like them? Do they favor the clock, ghost runner, and larger bases? Again, that's from Joe Curry in Youngstown. Thanks, Joe. I can't speak for the umpires. I don't know that the umpires have been asked. I mean, the umpires don't
It's more
like it
for them
when
to
they're
do. Yeah,
yeah,
more for them to do, and
but I think the players and the fans universally like all this stuff, right?
yeah, they stopped complaining about it, and I'm glad they got off of. Well, this pitch clock is why these guys' arms are getting hurt. They were getting hurt for 25 years. Just stop with that. You know, they're getting hurt because you want everybody to throw 98 miles an hour and have a spin rate that's like faster than the planet Saturn. That's why they're getting hurt.
Yeah.
And
I do think the players like the Ghost Runner because there's no more
yeah,
20 inning games that make them late
exactly.
for their playing. I think it's more exciting for the fans. The larger bases, steals are up. I think
Hmm.
steals are higher than they've been in years, which is something that MLB wanted.
And they
And
also
yeah, you
think
just
it
talked about
was
the
going to
clock.
help
So
guys avoid injuries. The purist in me was a little tough where you couldn't really go barreling into second base on a double play or at home plate. But in the end, you really want your guys healthy, and it's kind of a bad way to get hurt.
yeah.
And the
So
nice thing about the bigger base too is, like, a lot of times you would see when that ball would roll down the first base would pick it up and throw it to the pitcher as he goes to cover, and the runner would get there at the same time, and that base is smaller, and somebody's stepping on somebody's ankle or injuries happen that way. This way, with that big base, you could just kind of put your foot on the corner of it
yeah.
and avoid injuries that way too.
I'm even seeing some colleges are using the rec softball base where there's a regular first base in the field of play, and then there's like another one connected to it that's foul. So there's two bases, one for the
That's
runner and one for
interesting.
the yeah. So I don't know if that'll ever come to
Yeah.
MLB. It seems like the larger base, like you said, might be working,
I
but
mean,
it's fun to watch.
Manfred, I give him a ton of credit because he really stepped up here and did some things that needed to be done in the face of a lot of criticism. And the Guardians, they do a lot of research on, do you like I've talked before about how I really like the new stuff they put in the Terrace Club where it was, and, that kind of thing. And that's why they changes. But the other thing, fans universally like the faster pace of play. And by the way, it's not like it's supersonic baseball. I think the average game time is like 2:33, which was in 1984, my last year covering the Tribe.
It's working. It's all
Yes.
working. So, all right, real quick, Terry. You mentioned Commissioner Manfred. He announced Tuesday that he has changed the league's policy on permanent ineligibility and that bans are now going to expire after someone dies. So, all members of the 1919 Black Sox, the Chicago Black Sox from the scandal when they threw the World Series, Pete Rose and some other people, Benny Kauf, former New York Giants outfielder, they're all
Wonder what
reinstated.
he did to get suspended.
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't
have to
know.
look that up.
Yeah.
But what do you think of all this? And there's been a lot of people down in Cincinnati who've been clamoring for Pete Rose to be in the Hall of
Hmm.
Fame for years. He passed away, I think, in September at age 83. But how do you feel about all this? Do you think it was time? Is this the right move?
Well, had Rose been on the ballot as a player, I would have voted for him. Um, I also, with the caveat of you ain't never managing, you're not coaching, you're not doing that. The gambling takes you out of that. But as a player, yes, I would have voted for him. So I'm glad to see that uh, there. That's my feeling. Shoeless Joe, I've read a fair amount of stuff on the Black Sox scandal, and he might have like at some point taken some money, but he certainly didn't throw the games. I forgot what he hit, like 384 or something like that in the World Series, and he was all over the place. Um, either he didn't understand or he just figured I'll take the money and just play ball anyway. Uh, so it's always an interesting one, and I'm glad they did it. I don't know if we, the regular baseball writers, will get to vote on these guys, or if they're going to have it all run through some kind of new
Oh,
committee
like
or
the
what.
veteran committee or the
Yeah,
reinstatement
something
committee
like
or
that.
something?
Could be
Yeah.
the suspended committee. I don't know.
Yeah. So Pete Rose will be eligible in 2028, and so will Shoeless Joe Jackson. They both will be on the ballot. It looks
Somebody
like
said, and there might have been a point. Another reason they may have waited till after Rose passed away, they may not have wanted him to give a Hall of Fame speech.
yeah.
They're conscious
it might have been
that.
vindictive, right? And who knows?
No.
Hey, well, you know what? You never know when time passes and
No,
somebody's
you
part of the
don't.
Hall
But
of
I mean,
Fame
I
and what they're
remember
going to
sitting
do.
with
He
Pete
might have
Rose.
played it
Now,
straight.
granted, this is in the middle 90s. His son, Petey Jr., was in camp with the tribe. It's spring training. And I heard Pete was down there watching Petey down in the minor league diamonds. Roberta was with me. So we went down. I introduced myself, sitting there, and yeah, come on, sit down. So he talked to me and Roberta for about 5 innings. And he says stuff like, I was the only guilty guy in prison. Nobody else did anything. You know what they got me on? Tax evasion. He's like Al Capone. Tax evasion. So this is what you would have gotten, I'm sure, at the speech.
Yeah.
And then he was talking about Petey and, how Petey's a good kid and plays so hard. And he said, it's really tough being Pete Rose Jr. in this. And he was delightful. It was really funny. But I could see why they may not want to let that thing loose on Hall of Fame Day, because you don't know what he was going to say.
Yeah.
And I remember writing that story, and I think I wrote a story a few years ago when or rather, was it last year he passed away?
Yeah, when he passed away, in September.
I think I did write about, him with that day, and I got a lot of emails generally from people that all ran into Rose somewhere or other, and they said he was some character, they liked him. Even those who don't
you
like
won't
him ended
forget
up
him.
kind of liking him.
Yeah, you remember it, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so.
this was not some guy just signed your autograph and didn't look at you. He say some stuff.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So I was sick last week, and I think I mentioned that I didn't get through all the emails. We've been kind of inviting people over the last few months to send in memories of some games they were at, or also you came up with the idea, Terry, of when you listened to games when you were a kid, maybe when you weren't supposed to. And also, I just realized I didn't pull that Orioles Wall Street Journal story that we talked about last week about the 4 starters. So I'll see if I can get that for next week. But here's a couple of emails we have to wrap up with. First one is from Mark in Chicago, and Mark says, I was in the backyard throwing a tennis ball against the garage, and I had taken the radio outside as usual, and then I'm hearing the broadcast. I know it was Herb's score. I don't remember if it was Joe Tate then on play-by-play. Of all the mayhem that happened as the game ensued, or tried to, and I was simply astounded. The next day, there was a picture in the Cleveland Press of someone with a stack of 27 empty beer cups. And I realized that what was described on the radio was no joke at all. It was 10-cent beer nights.
Yeah.
The radio team did a great job of trying their best to capture the scene unfolding in the moment. I should dig online if there's any capture of what they had broadcast. It's kind of history as it happened. So there's Mark in Chicago.
It was Joe Tate who did the game.
Okay.
And Tate told me that some of the policemen were kind of driving around listening to it, and they heard this, and they just came down to the stadium because they realized, Joe made it sound like the ballpark was going to collapse and there would be blood on the bases, which I guess is fairly close.
Yeah. That's something. Well, thanks for that one, Mark. And our last one here is from Nate Clear, and Nate is from Sandusky. And Nate says, "When I was 8 years old in 1995, when the Indians made it to the World Series, and that magical season hooked me for life. My brother and I would always listen to the games on the radio. Our parents were pretty strict about our 9:30 p.m. bedtime, but they gave us a little leeway to keep listening from bed as the games wrapped up. Fast forward to Sunday, August 5th, 2001. We were listening as the Tribe was absolutely getting clobbered by the Mariners. At some point, my dad walked by our room, heard the lopsided score, and said, 'All right, boys, shut it off and go to sleep.' My brother obeyed. I, however, pulled the classic move, turned the volume way down, and tucked the radio under the covers. You probably know where this is going. Hours later, after midnight, Cleveland completed one of the greatest comebacks in baseball history. Kenny Lofton scored from second base in the bottom of the ninth to walk it off, capping a rally from a 12-run deficit. I was under the blankets silently screaming, quote unquote, and pumping my fists like a lunatic, trying not to wake anyone up and blow my cover." That was a good pun there. Didn't want to blow his cover. The next morning, I had to pretend to be surprised when we saw the headline in the paper. Love the podcast, guys. Keep it up. Again, that's Nate Clear from Sandusky. That's a wonderful story. Thanks, Nate. And childhood radio memories are always fun ones. So
yeah, and the great thing, I was talking with Tom Hamilton about this, how so much has changed with media. If you watch a broadcast, even from the 90s or even the 70s, certainly there, how much more goes on the way they bring the game to you now with all the graphics and the analytics and the computers and stuff. Baseball and the radio sounds sort of the same.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Maybe they have a few more stats, but that's it. Ball one, strike one. Boy, it's a beautiful day. Here comes the manager now, and he steps out. I mean, you're still doing the same. And, and everybody needs to get a Toyota. Or how about it's time for a beer? I mean, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's just.
I remember listening to Harry Carey and Jimmy Pearsall doing the White Sox in the 1970s, and Harry would just be like, There's a home run. Let's have another Falstaff.
Right, yeah.
Just in the middle of the broadcast.
Well, I mean, it's like I remember when the Tribe had turned a double play, this was Jimmy Dudley in the 60s, and there it is, they turned the double play, and he goes, and it's time for Cons, the wiener the world awaited. All beef hot dogs. And I guess they bought into, like, if there's a double play or something else, it was time for a Cons and wiener, which my grandfather loved Cons wieners, and I ate them. I spent a fair amount of time at Grandpa Klasik's house on the east side, and we certainly did have, and they were good wieners. I don't know if it's still around.
The wieners that the world awaited. I love that.
Cons, the wiener the world awaited.
Hey, so I was just thinking, Terry, we are in middle of May here, and Tom Hamilton is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame this July.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, we should ask our listeners, if you have Tom Hamilton, we talked about people meeting Pete Rose.
Yeah.
But I would love it if our listeners could maybe email in some stories or memorable moments with Tom Hamilton.
That would be
during
great.
his career, and we can maybe start reading those as we get closer to July. What do you think of that?
That would be really good. And kind of too, if you want to, I'd be interested to see. Rate your favorite Tribe play-by-play guys over the years. Let's see.
Oh yeah,
that'd be top 3 or top 5 or whatever.
And tell us why and memorable moments.
Yeah, because it's a tough. I mean, right now Jimmy Dudley's in the Hall of Fame, and Hamilton's in the Hall of Fame, and what was his name? Granger. I can't. Oh, I'm having a hard time. There's somebody else. It was the real early days of radio from Cleveland. He's in the Hall of Fame. Joe Tate's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He did the Tribe for 10 years on radio, and I think another 10 or 15 on TV. So they've had a lot of good ones. Mike Keegan was very good too. I remember that. And Rosie is a perfect kind of straight man or whatever for Hamilton.
Yeah, Cleveland's been really fortunate to have some outstanding broadcasters through the years. So yeah, again, send in some Tom Hamilton stories, and like Terry said, some. If you want to rank some of your favorites through the years, send them in sports@cleveland.com. Email us, and if you want to put Tom Hamilton or broadcasters in the headline, we will grab those and we'll start reading those. We have a nice run up here with some time to kind of do some memorable stories about Tom Hamilton and connecting with the fans. So, all right, I think that's it. Terry, you got anything else for this week?
That's it for me.
All right, I think we're going to try and tape early, maybe on Monday next week.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's do that. Enjoy your sports week. We'll catch you next time on Terry's Talk.